So welcome back to part 2 of our video on the year 2009. I think for part 2 you wanted to have an Ulster focus.
Yeah, obviously we'll mention some of the Munster players as well, but it was a big year for Ulster and I just wanted to maybe talk a little bit about that.
So why don't we start with Michael Toll?
Yeah, absolutely. So Michael Toll won his 10th All-Ireland final, beating Aidan Murphy in the All-Ireland final, and that was an amazing achievement. And we go back to 1988, he beat Mikey O'Driscoll, probably better known as Loxy, Mikey Lox O'Driscoll in Tassa in 1988, and I think he was just 18 years of age. He'd won the under-18 All-Ireland the year before, so that was the start of his campaign. We mentioned the 1989 one last week, where he beat Declan O'Donovan in that marathon, and then in 1991 he beat Bill Daly in a super final in Ballingeary, which I at the time dubbed as the second battle of Caymanay, because it was up the pass of Caymanay. And then in 94 he beat Bill Daly again, and that was at Bandon on the road that the All-Ireland, the European Championships were played in later. And it's estimated that there were 20,000 people at that score, and this came from a very reliable source, a non-bowling source. And I remember he was an accountant, Sean O'Callaghan, who used to bowl himself, but he was a big GA man more than a bowler. But he was travelling through the road on that day for some other purpose, and he and some friends of his, he was an accountant, got out of their car and they went and they counted all the cars in the car park, and they estimated the number of people that would be in each car, and they came to the conclusion there were 20,000 people at the score.
Wow.
And it was a big score for Michael Toll to win, and there was a little bit of controversy around the call at one point in the score, but it stopped for a while, but he moved on and he won it. That was 1994. 1994. Yeah. And then 96, he beat John O'Driscoll, who was one of the big players. Then 98, we spoke about that one before, against Kieran Gould. 99, he beat Seamus Sexton. 2000, we've already mentioned as well, against Philip O'Donovan. Yeah. And then he won 2001 against Kieran Gould in Cailkill, and then the 2009. And he was beaten in 6 All-Ireland finals. Twice by James Buckley, once by Pat Butler, Kieran Gould, David Murphy and John O'Driscoll. You know, so that was, he had a fantastic career, amazing guy. Yeah.
It was a particularly big stake. 2009,
oh my God, there was, 46,000 euros, which,
a lot of money.
It's a lot of money.
Especially the year that it was, right?
Yeah, it was the middle of the recession. Yeah, you think about it, like that was a huge amount of money. Yeah, absolutely. And he played in the King of the Roads final that year as well. He got to the King of the Roads final against David Murphy. And David and Aidan Murphy played in the semi-final. But David Murphy won that final. But in the semi-final, my recollection of the semi-final was that David Murphy did some of the most incredible bowling ever seen. And I remember there was a very, very knowledgeable man in the bowling scene walking next to me. I was refereeing, and he said, "My God," he said, "this is one of the old-timers," he said. "We haven't seen anything like this since the days of Scully and Barry," you know, so he was right up there. And in the final, actually, Michael Toll put it up to him in the final. He threw a huge second last shot out light, and but David Murphy still won. Yeah. And that was the 25th anniversary of the King of the Roads, actually.
Kind of a landmark year.
Yeah, it was a landmark year. And I remember we did a special presentation to the 4 players who played in the very first one. Yeah. Bill Daly and Harry Toll played in the senior one, and Dan Keneally, the East Cork champion of 1985, played against Patrick Comiskey in the other. So presentation, but the person we got to do the presentation was Conor Coonahan, the Cork football manager.
Yeah.
And he was a really successful football manager for Cork, and of course I knew him well, and his brother was in my class at school and so on. But it was very nice of him to come and do the presentation. And in 2010, of course, he won the All-Ireland for Cork.
Yeah. We've mentioned one Toll already.
Yes, there was another Toll, Deborah Toll, Mallon. She's Michael Toll's sister. She won the Senior All-Ireland and she beat Geraldine Daly that year for the second year in succession. Yeah. And so that was very disappointing for Geraldine Daly, actually, you know, to lose those 2 All-Irelands. And there was another Toll connection, and that was Thomas Mackel. And Thomas Mackel won the under-18 All-Ireland. And he won the under-18 All-Ireland against Killian Kingston. And Killian Kingston is from my own club, and that was a big disappointment for us. I remember well the disappointment of it, because Killian had beaten Thomas Mackel in a previous All-Ireland, and on the day he had a chance really of winning that, but there was a shot from McKee's wall down at the bottom of the hill in Tassa out towards the bridge, where Killian had a chance to go light and he didn't, you know, and that kind of came against him, and he just didn't do it. But actually, we were talking about the Senior All-Ireland. Aidan Murphy was unlucky in that Senior All-Ireland as well, because his second last ball, I think, third last ball was blocked, and it would have made a big difference to him. He'd have gone out light in that shot against Michael Toll. So yeah, but Thomas Mackel, I was saying the Toll connection, he's Michael Toll's nephew. So that was a kind of a big breakthrough for him, and he came to the King of the Roads as well that year, and he played in a double, and my God, he was super. And I suppose we got an inkling of how good he was, and he showed that afterwards in the King of the Roads. But that's for another day's conversation. I realised that you know, we're kind of short on time. Yeah. And
what do you remember about the vets that year?
Oh yeah, the veterans, and we did mention Pat Mallon last week.
Yeah.
Pat Mallon won the veteran final, and I suppose what was interesting about it was that it was the 30th anniversary of a famous All-Ireland senior final win by him against Johnny Creedon, and he beat Johnny Creedon in Portmore, Blackwatertown, in the All-Ireland, the Senior All-Ireland in 1979. So this is 30 years later, and he beat Jimmy O'Regan in that year's All-Ireland veteran final, and Jimmy O'Regan was a kind of a surprise package because he beat Seamus Sexton, the famous Seamus Sexton, in the Munster final. But anyway, Pat Mallon won that All-Ireland final, and I think it's worthy to say that Pat Mallon is somebody that should be mentioned. He was beaten in the 1978 All-Ireland final by Pat Butler, the great Pat Butler. But he won several All-Irelands. He won the intermediate in Ballyshawn in 1982, beating John Murphy, David and Aidan Murphy's father. He beat Tommy Butler in the Junior B final at Cailkill in 2001. He beat Owen Reardon in the Junior C final in 2007 in Eglish in County Tyrone. And he beat John Joe Donovan in Ballincorrig, my own road, in the veteran final as well in 2004, I think. Yeah. So Pat Mallon is one of those great players, you know. I mean, the longevity of his career and the competitiveness of the guy, you know, like, my God, like when he was playing, he was really, fired up for it, you know.
So obviously you've spoken about a lot of great players this week.
Yeah, and I suppose one of the greats has a connection to 2009. That's the great Danny McParland. And sadly, Danny McParland died in 2009. And he is and will always be an iconic figure in bowling. It's a very special place because although they were called All-Irelands, the championships played in Munster and Ulster. The first time they were combined into one single championship was on the Maya Road in 1963 when Danny McParland played the up-and-coming and great player Derry Kenny. And I suppose the expectation for the Cork fans was that Derry Kenny would win, but he didn't. Danny McParland beat him in that All-Ireland final. And the following year, in 1964, he came to Dublin Hill. And Dublin Hill was the Cork road of the Cork bowlers, and absolutely home of the home. And he played against a guy called McBarry. And that's a very famous score, but he beat McBarry in 1964. So that was the famous Danny McParland. And I remember him well. He was a larger than life character, and actually a personality not unlike McBarry's himself, a very forceful character. And there's two things I remember distinctly about it. One was being at a presentation ceremony in Armagh, and there was a bit of a scuffle between two of the local guys there, and he spoke to them, and I said, "Come on, lads, cop yourselves on," sort of, and they weren't, and eventually he went over and he caught both of them and he put them under an arm each, and he walked out the door and he threw the two of them out on the street. I said, my God, what a powerful man he was. Yeah. The other one was, I remember coming back from Skibbereen. We'd been down at the All-Ireland finals, and I was getting a lift back in the Armagh bus, and Danny was in the bus, and one of the Armagh players was complaining. He'd lost the All-Ireland final, and he was complaining about his road chores, they showed him wrong here and they showed him wrong there. Yeah. And I think Danny lost patience anyway, and he said, "Listen," he said, "you're the man throwing the ball." He said, "You decide where to throw it." He said, "Don't be blaming the road chores." Yeah. So he was a big character in every respect. Yeah. And he died in 2009. Yeah.
Well, it's a landmark year for a lot of reasons, good and bad.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So yeah.
I'm always surprised by the things that we turn up with years that other people suggest. Yeah,
absolutely. There's such a wealth of stuff that happens in the bowling world,
because we could approach this by picking an event and then just doing that year, but even if we just choose years other people are suggesting, do keep suggesting them. We always find
and there's lots of other things we didn't mention. I remember like the senior women's Munster final. Denise Murphy played against Geraldine Daly in Bain-Law, and my God, the only 4 ball that Geraldine Daly had was the last one. Yeah. So it was heartbreaking for Denise Murphy, but of course a huge win for Geraldine Daly. So there was lots of different things.
So another very interesting year and another interesting video. We hope that you're enjoying them.
Yeah, but we're enjoying
making them. Yeah. So keep your year suggestions coming, and if you have any comments, do let us know. And thank you, Seamus.
Thank you.